أهلا وسهلا فيكم متابعينا، حلقة جديدة من برنامج شرايها عليا. معكم عليا المؤيد. اليوم عندي حلقة مع شخص متشافي من مرض السرطان بالطب البديل. أتكلم معها باللغة الإنجليزية، حواري معها بالإنجليزية، ولكن موجودة الترجمة، لازم تدخلون عليها من الإعدادات في الحلقة نفسها بتحصلون الترجمة بالعربي كاملة. Thank you very much, Kate, for coming with me on the show today. I'm very excited to have you, and I have hundreds of questions for you. But I'll start with if you can give us like a 30-second introduction of yourself first.
Okay.
And why you're on the show. Yes.
Okay, Meherban. My name is Kay Alison Shamarani. 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with lobular invasive grade 3 breast cancer with a high pleomorphic presentation. At that time, I'm a mum of 4. I was working as a nurse, and my life was really hectic. I had private health care. My brother-in-law also is a surgeon in Iran. So I received very quickly what is deemed the gold standard of care. And I had surgery, a double mastectomy and a reconstruction. And then following reading some books post-surgery, I decided that I wasn't going to go down the conventional route. So I declined chemotherapy, radiotherapy, tamoxifen, and Zoladex. And that brings me to why I'm still here today, 7 years later.
What was the time you were given at the time when you were? And first of all, your diagnosis sounds scary. Is that a typical breast cancer? Is that a rare kind of type of breast cancer is it?
Well, they typically, when I first asked, I was told, why have I got this? And the surgeon said to me, an unlucky roll of the dice. That was the first thing. So my diagnosis, and at that point, I'd been a nurse for almost 30 years, and I'm a nutritionist as well now. So my diagnosis was grade 3 invasive lobular breast cancer with a high pleomorphic presentation. So after the surgery, I began to research my actual diagnosis, and I looked at peer-reviewed studies and science-based medicine, which is what we're given all the time. And I found 3 studies that stated if I'd have had surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and all of the adjunct drugs later, my survival at 2 years would be 20%, and my survival at 5 years was 0%. So I trundled off back to one of my meetings with my surgeon, who is, I have to say, from an aesthetic point of view, I have no qualms, and supported my choices. But I went back and I said, now you told me it was an unlucky roll of the dice. I'm not a gambling woman, but that would mean it would be the same world over. You know, statistically, you would get that mean average. But our incidence of breast cancer was, I think it's 1 in 7 now, it was 1 in 8. And the incidence of cancer in the UK is 1 in 2, any cancer. So I said, well, I've read these peer-reviewed studies. And he paused and he went quiet. And then he said, well, it was early breast cancer. I said, well, it didn't look very early on the diagnosis. And I said, what do you say about this, all of these studies? And he said, well, with improvements in care and treatment, we hope that you'll live longer. And I thought, I've just had my breasts removed for hope. And at that point, I knew that the only person that was really going to direct my care was myself.
So what were the emotions that were going on in your head at that time? It must have been a scary place to be.
Well, initially, I only really had 1 day of fear that I remember. And my ex-husband was an amazing scientist, amazing. And he said, nothing comes pure by chance, it's cause and effect. So he began all the research, and I really have him to thank for finding the Gerson therapy. My initial fear was that I was going to die and leave my 4 children without a mother. We had no other family in the UK. And I knew my children needed me. They physically needed me to take care of them. So that was my fear. It was never really for myself. As soon as I began to realize why you get cancer, toxicity and deficiency, and then that is the cause and the effect is cancer, then if that was the cause, then to remove the cause would be a case of reversing disease, which is what Dr. Max Gerson did. As soon as I understood it and understand all of the therapy, all fear left me, and it was replaced with almost an excitement, this excitement to get on with it, to just get on with it. And then I just became the researcher. I just read and read and read, and then I would go to the references, and I would go off and read the references, and it was all. I would say, what actually happens to you during the therapy is difficult initially in the first 6 months, but as the therapy went on, it kind of suited me because it was very regimented. I'm very regimented. I'm almost a little bit OCD. I was a nurse. I'd been a flight attendant for 10 years as well, and I ran my house with military precision, which you do if you've got 4 children, going to all different schools and activities. And so I not at any time did I ever get fearful, ever. If I ever wobbled, which is I can't really remember wobbling, I pushed everything outside of what I wanted to do. And that, including friends, I just distanced myself. Anyone who didn't agree with what I was doing, and I only really told 6 or 7 people. And I think, there was a couple of those I instantly just excluded from my life because it was detrimental to my healing. You really don't want anyone around you questioning.
Sorry, you told only 6 people of the decision to go alternative, or of the cancer in the first
decision? I had cancer. I never told my children. My children didn't know I had cancer. They didn't know for almost 2 years. Oh. I told my mother, and then I had to distance myself from my mother for many, many months because her fear. Well, she was very fearful, and she screamed at me and told me I was being selfish for not doing chemotherapy. But that anger was a fear-based response. She was just fearful. And once she kind of understood what I was doing, she stepped back. Yeah. Friends, I literally, initial decision, there was a few friends I just cut off. They just weren't good to have around. And it was literally just, as a mother, you always put your children first, always. Well, I did. And it was the first time in my life I actually put myself first, because if I was okay, my kids would be okay. So I made them late on so many occasions, but I didn't care because the priority was me.
Yeah. I'm curious now so you decided to go the Gerson route, the Gerson therapy route. Yeah.
And also a couple of other things. I did a couple of other things as well.
Yeah, so that's my question. So from, obviously you must have done a lot of research to make such a drastic decision. So during your research, surely you came across the many options in the alternative world to heal cancer, one of which
I did.
is Gerson therapy. So what made you lean towards going all out Gerson versus the other things, or in addition to the other things you've chosen?
Well, there are many things that will cure cancer, will kill a cancer. Coles toxins, Laetrile, amygdalin, as people know it, B17. I actually did the tablet version of B17 protocol as well. Hyperbaric, hypothermia, even cannabis oil, the latest sort of gold rush cannabis oil. I also had mistletoe injections for a year. But none of those things will restore the body to homeostasis. And the Gerson therapy, when you understand that cancer is a metabolic disease caused by toxicity, deficiency, and failure to generate an immune response. When I understood that, it is the only therapy that addresses that. So it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. So that was why it was very easy. And this is what I always, when I do videos, when I do interviews, when I'm talking to patients, this is the thing I always say. Everything else is an adjunct, but the Gerson therapy is the foundation. And the run up, all the time, when we learn new things, we go back, we go forward, we go back. And when we learn something, we then go back and we look at what we've learned, we can put it with what's happened to ourselves. So something that was really interesting for me, which struck a chord right in the beginning, I often hear cancer patients saying, I never got sick. I haven't been sick for years. But of course they have. They just can't generate an immune response. And something that was really good for me, I'm a big cat lover, a big animal lover. And I had been vegetarian. Well, I used to eat fish, but pescatarian. But I realized that I had all these rescued cats and I never got flea bites for about 3 years. Never got flea bites in the spring. And that would always tell me when I needed to put flea treatment my kids would be scratching, "Mummy, Mummy, we've got flea bites everywhere." And I never got one. And in the summer, I never got mosquito bites for a few years. And of course, it was because I couldn't generate an immune response. About 6 months into the therapy, I started getting flea bites. No, maybe a year into the therapy, I began to get flea bites. And I knew then that I was swimming back to shore, if you like. You know, I was out, cast adrift in a boat. That was me trying to heal, floating around. And about a year in, I knew that I was starting to swim towards shore. I wasn't yet at shore. That would take a lot longer. But that was I understood it. So the Gerson therapy is the foundation. And that was a thing which led me to actually stop doing mistletoe injections, because when you do the Gerson therapy, you can't exercise. And I'd been crazy exercising, doing weights, doing cycling, doing everything, getting fatter and fatter and sicker and sicker. So when I got cancer and I did Gerson, well, got cancer, we all have cancer. When I exhibited a symptom of cancer and was diagnosed, I stopped exercising and I lost 36 pounds in weight in about 6 to 8 weeks. And the reason you don't exercise is you can't generate energy at a cellular level. So you want to conserve all of your energy for healing, for killing a tumor, for healing. So mistletoe stimulated an artificial pyrexia, a temperature, in an attempt to kill cancer cells. And I would do it one day, and the next day I would be utterly floored, exhausted. And that's using a lot of energy that my body was trying to use. So I stopped after a year. I understood that and stopped it.
So now, knowing what you know, what do you think led up to your illness?
Salt. I had salt on tomatoes, on eggs, lots and lots of eggs. I did high protein, animal protein diets in an attempt to lose weight. I was never fat, but I was certainly too fat for me. Diet Coke, eating lots of cheese, lots of, chocolate. I ate chocolate like it was going out of fashion. I just loved it. But of course, all of those things were merely, they were just giving me a high, because I was rushing everywhere with 4 children, doing it all on my own, doing all my housework, driving 90 miles a day to get them to school, working. I would feed my kids healthy and I would survive on coffee, on chocolate, eating leftovers. And then I was also terribly stressed. I was deeply unhappy in my marriage. It was a very negative marriage. And I don't really want to say too much about my marriage because it's my children's father and I have their humility to think of. You know, he was very good at lots of things, but together we were a bad combo. So that was, all of that was making me very stressed, high anxiety, and I was showing symptoms of that. I always had urine infections. I always had yeast infections. I had ectopic heartbeats. I had lots of arthritis starting. And these, which I forgot to mention, another therapy I did was actually the healing code. I don't know whether you've heard of it.
Yes.
I did the healing code. I did the healing code religiously, 3 times a day, every day for 2 years. I never missed it. So I think the lead up to cancer was, I just had the typical cancer diet, the psychological cancer diet. And interesting, the more, I have the genetic makeup of my parents. So there was the predisposition, but, they didn't live healthy. My father's died of cancer. I had IVF. I took the birth control pill for many, many years. I took the morning after pill. IVF in itself causes cancer, that high estrogen level. I was clearly suffering from estrogen dominance. I had ovarian cysts. When I look at all the predisposing factors written in literature, the only thing that's missing is my name.
And what do you think is the percentage of the effect on you of psychological effects, it's like mental stress, emotional stress, versus the physical things that you were doing?
The mental stress is huge. I think, I know from research, it does change your DNA. And there was also, cellular memory. We used to believe, as medics, that cellular memory was only in the brain, but of course it's in every cell in the body. And there's lots of scientific evidence to prove that. And I used to be outward, very jolly and good fun, and the face of a clown. I'd put my makeup on, get out the door. But I used to be quite negative. I used to down talk myself a lot. I always felt not good enough. My husband's family were very educated and very wealthy. And I was the daughter of a secretary and a postman, very bright people, but didn't have the opportunities. And I was a nurse. Now I think I'm a nurse. I'm proud of it. I could have been anything. I could have been a doctor. I could have been anything. I don't want to be. I'm glad I wasn't. But I used to think I was never good enough. I was always quite nervous inside, and that has a huge impact on that is a foundation for disease in itself. So I think you could look at this as a clock face. Each one of these things is disease causing. And I think for myself personally, and not, there were people in concentration camps in wars that didn't get cancer, but I think for me personally, it was a huge contributing factor. Probably, a good 30-40% would be how I felt. And I've done a lot of, particularly in the last couple of years, mending, if you like, of how I am about myself.
How many years has it been since your diagnosis?
Well, I actually found the tumour 7 years ago.
Okay.
So my diagnosis is 7 years in February, but I had the lump, before that in the October. But again, like I say, that was when I felt the lump. Cancer started many years prior to that. Interestingly, I had a mammogram, and, I shouldn't have had a mammogram. We all know that. The breast tissue is too dense, and it was negative. But I'd had a mammogram 3 years earlier on the same area that I felt was a little bit puckered, and it was negative. The day I went and had it the second time, I had an ultrasound and a biopsy, and, it came up with the worst diagnosis. But, if you have a mammogram every year for 10 years, you increase your chance of just getting cancer from the iatrogenic effects by 33%, the disease-causing effects. So I'm sure that put it up as well. So, I said, it was all on a clock face.
So speaking of your psychological factors, once you went Gerson and you unraveled and you started to heal physically, how do you feel that contributed to the psychology? I want to talk more about how you went Gerson and how that affected you physically, but I'm curious, did it also help you undo the emotions because you came in with all that emotional baggage? Yes.
I'll tell you something very interesting. From a young child, and we were fed on typical English diet. I was born in 1965, and we had the meat and 2 veg, but salt on everything, lots of meat, and then lots of the new products that were coming on the market, all the tinned foods and fast foods and just garbage. But I used to have really bad nightmares as a child growing up, and we didn't have, my parents did the best they could, but it was a very traumatic childhood, very traumatic. Things that children shouldn't see, we saw. Things we shouldn't hear, we heard. So I had terrible nightmares. And as I grew up as an adult, I was still having very vivid dreams and bad dreams, lots of frantic dreams. When my children were born, dreams that my children were falling down lift shafts, horrible dreams. I started the Gerson therapy, and this is straight up on my children's lives. I stopped dreaming, which was bizarre. I just literally, because I stuck to it rigidly. I think there was 3 occasions in 2 years when I ate a piece of birthday cake for my children because they didn't know I had cancer. I stuck to it rigidly, and I didn't dream, which is phenomenal. And I was doing the healing code. Now, something that really made me feel good emotionally and made me realize that my mind was a huge part was I didn't want tamoxifen, and I was told to go and have my ovaries out. I went to see a gynecologist, and I thought, no, I'm not going to my grave with anything else that nature gave me chopped off. It's just not normal. And so my estrogen was still very high. And when I started Gerson therapy, I had really heavy menses, clotting, cramps, everything. So I carried on doing the healing code. And then when I was 2 years into the healing, into the Gerson therapy, and I was still, after 2 years, doing 9 juices. I began to do the healing code for my mind as well, my mind, body, and soul. And I said, please put my ovaries to sleep. I don't need them anymore, but I need this estrogen to come down. And I did this over the specific points, you know this, and all of my, you know, I'm worthy, I'm equal, I'm a success, my future is full, all of this. And I never saw a period again from that month, nothing. From I started doing the healing code, nothing. Now I had 2 older sisters and one of them still hasn't menopaused. So at 48 and a half, I'm menopaused and I haven't had a hot flush. I've had no symptoms to date, nothing. And my estrogen literally went and then nosedived. And my consultant says, you've menopaused. I said, yeah, I saw that. Because I read my own bloods as well. And that was a mind thing. That was my mind. And I knew that I had to have that. So I just, and I think, yeah, as I did the healing code and the Gerson therapy and the dreams went, I relaxed. I have to just say this to you. I read a quote very, very early on in the first couple of months. And it was a quote by Arthur Miller, who was married. He was the playwright married to Marilyn Monroe. And he said, when we put our trust in idols, we become but children. When we put our trust in God, therefore ourselves, we become open to infinite awareness and possibilities. And that really resonated with me. And I've definitely found my faith, and I have no fear of death because of that. This all came because of doing Gerson, because of cancer. I have no fear of death. I have a good, strong faith now. And I think that's all contributed to my psychological well-being.
I know we're going to get bombarded with questions about the healing code. So can you explain to us the process? I know it's a bit out there, so you need an open...
I don't believe it is. Yeah, I don't believe it is out there, because I did two. Yeah. So you do a specific prayer. I pray that now, if you are not scientifically minded, the very first opening prayer, for me, I had to research that. And there is scientific evidence done on patients who were the organ recipients and woke up after having a transplant and started to want to paint pictures. And it turned out that the donor was an artist. That was his, and that's just one incident. So cellular memory. So the prayer is all to do with that. So I pray that all known and unknown negative images, that's everything we see every day, watching TV, death, murder, kill, movies, death, murder, kill, and cancer. We see it bombarded in every TV program, every movie, every soap, because the pharma companies want it written into the script, so we're bombarded. So I pray that all known and unknown negative images, unhealthy beliefs, and destructive cellular memory be found, opened, and healed by filling me with the light, life, and love of God. And I would do this with my hands up and imagine God's light coming through my hands and my head into my entire body. I pray that this healing be increased 100 times or more. Amen. Now, the next part of your healing code, I took a lot of time writing it, and it gives an insight into who I was and what I thought of myself. And it's very specific to each individual. So I'm bearing all telling you my healing code. So my prayer for me was, I give myself, and you do it over specific points. You do all of it over this point, then you hold your hands here, then you hold your hands here. So mine, I'm going to do it quite quick because it's a little bit long. So I said, I give myself permission.
Just before you continue, can you just tell us about the purpose of holding so you hold the fingers this way on certain points?
Well, it was the guy who developed it all. He fell asleep on an aircraft, and I believe he had Lou Gehrig's disease, and he woke up and it was a dream. So he wrote it down. But in one of my research, I looked at Chinese charts and chakra points and vortexes. And I read about a study that was done where they took some American military servicemen and they injected them into the chakra points with radio opaque dye, put them in an MRI scanner, and wow, it stayed within the vortexes as shown on ancient charts. Perfect. That was all I needed. So it was, I give myself permission to be loving and forgiving toward myself, God, and others. When I forgive, I learn to see things as God sees them, understand why they happened, and know they will all come together for my greater and higher good. I am the one who creates who I am today. I choose to be loving, forgiving, and free of my past. For I am lovable, I am forgivable, I am valuable, I am worthy, I am equal, I'm a success. The future is full of hope for me. I am living a happy, healthy, long life. I am loved and in love in a loving, stable relationship. I have abundance. I am successful in everything I do. My children are happy, healthy, well-adjusted, and reaching their potential. We have a good, loving, stable relationship. Those who are harsh with me do so for they were treated that way themselves. I choose to begin a cycle of kindness and compassion. Amen. And I would say that each time. So when I did a bit about, I had really bad hemorrhoids, all from my first pregnancy, all the way through. So when the very first time I did the healing code, I put in about, and you say, you know, I pray that all known and unknown negative images, unhealthy beliefs, destructive cellular memories, and any health issues I have, such as the cancer I had in my breasts and my hemorrhoids, be found, opened, and healed. I never had my hemorrhoids again. Now, some of that is down to detoxing the liver, but I never saw them again after that, and I never have since. And that was in 1 month. So when I did it, when I wanted to incorporate, put my ovaries to sleep, I did that in the very first bit in the prayers, and please put any health issues I have, such as my high estrogen, and my ovaries still producing estrogen, I don't need them anymore, please switch them off. And I never had a menstrual cycle again, ever. I did that at the beginning of the month, nothing. And for me, that was like, oh my goodness, I'm a conventionally trained nurse. I have a diploma in nutrition. This is just wild. But I now do it. I do it for, and you can do it for other people. I still do it for things.
Yeah. Well, for people watching, the Healing Code is a book that has actually been translated into Arabic, so it does exist in Arabic.
Oh, I tell everyone to get it. It's wonderful.